Today I feel really good. Nah, I'm gonna rephrase it. I feel really good today because after weeks of research, I finally made the decision to start recording. The process has been the same for 3 videos now. Several viewings of the film I chose, then a lot of reading and video viewing to arrive with a video that reflects the love I have for the said film. I don't make a living making these kinds of video, but I feel good when I create something and when I can express my love of cinema to people. And after 2 excursions where I met 2 emblematic figures of cinema, Charlie Chaplin and Jean-Luc Godard, this time I'm treating myself to a film that's perhaps a little bit less artsy, but one that has followed me for many years. I'm obviously speaking, as you saw by clicking on the title, of The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, directed by Nathan Joran, but especially popular for having been put together by Ray Harryhausen, the special effects legend, who is the biggest star of the film without a shadow of a doubt. Ray Harryhausen is special in that he was considered more than the directors of the films in which he participated. We often talk about an Harryhausen movie, even though he never directed a long feature film. However, he has always been the heart of each of the film in which he has participated. Some of you will ask me, why am I talking about The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad today? It's true that this is not Harryhausen's best films in terms of special effects, but it is a film with undeniable qualities which mark a generation of filmmakers and creators. And please believe me, I didn't want to speak smack against the film by telling you about his special effects. I think it's undeniable that some of Harryhausen's technique will be improved upon through his future film. However, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad has an energy, simplicity, and charm that I found unique. It's a film that has charm and will continue to charm children. It's also a powerful dose of adventures that continues to entertain nostalgic fans of that era, but which deserve recognition today for any cinema lover. So yeah, I believe it's just that good. So I'm going to take a moment to demonstrate why The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is still an important film today. I decided to separate this video into 3 parts: the context of the film's creation, the film's special effects, and its other inherent qualities. Just for general information, I own The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad on DVD and VHS. Yes, I'm still a VHS guy. For the occasion, I decided to watch the DVD that I had in my box set, Ray Harryhausen Legendary Monster Series, which is by the way in a very poor condition. But this box set, as well as the one with its science fiction films, are essential in my opinion. The Seventh Voyage DVD from Columbia Pictures has some excellent extras, such as a series of interviews about the film, as well as a documentary on Ray Harryhausen's career, Ray Harryhausen's Chronicles. My only nitpick with this DVD release is the cover. It doesn't do the film justice by making Sinbad bigger than the creatures in the film, who are the real stars anyway. On that note, I always thought they looked like toys on the cover. The 15th anniversary edition fixed it everything. Regarding my VHS version, I have to say I love this cover. It's a video store cut version. It's simply wonderful, featuring the best moment of the film for me with the fight with the skeleton and introducing the very dangerous dragon. This cover had created expectation of an impressive adventure, and this little sentence at the bottom of the VHS was the guarantee of a good time. Of all the versions of the film and in all formats, this cover in my eyes remains the best. For this video, I was interested in several books about Harryhausen, but if I had just one to recommend, if you want to know more about this giant of cinema, it would be Ray Harryhausen, An Animated Life. After all, what's a better source than the man himself to learn more about him and his films? This is also the best place to see Harryhausen's drawings for the preparation of several features of his. Personally, I found it to be a fascinating read from start to finish. Now, sit back, make sure you have something comforting by your side, because we are about to dive into a fantastic adventure that has forever marked the world of cinema. Welcome to The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Let's start at the beginning. I don't feel like giving you a detailed biography of Ray Harryhausen for this particular video, but I will give you a general overview of what led Harryhausen to create The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. As was the case for many people in the film industry, Harryhausen's first viewing of King Kong was not only an artistic shock, it was the film that literally convinced him that he should be in the world of big screen special effects. It's still impressive to see that the effect of King Kong on Harryhausen was similar to the effect Harryhausen's film had on many directors 30 years later.
Of course, some people say Casablanca or Citizen Kane. I say Jason and the Argonauts is the greatest film ever made.
But Harryhausen's beginnings were modest, and his first miniature models were constructed from whatever he could find. His mother's coats, destroyed to create a miniature bear, is a perfect example. Harryhausen received tremendous support from his parents, who encouraged him to pursue his dream. 14 years after his first viewing of King Kong and after working on various animation projects, Harryhausen became an assistant animator on the film Mighty Joe Young. This was his entry into Hollywood, and the quality of his work was such that Harryhausen was assigned as the main animator for many Hollywood's B-movies of the time. While some of these films are not masterpieces, there is no denying that Harryhausen's work was phenomenal and allowed some of these films to survive the test of time. Harryhausen excelled in the art of animation, but he was also recognized in the industry as an efficient and fast animator. This recognition would later allow him much more freedom in his project, because in Hollywood, time is money. Harryhausen built his reputation through a panoply of science fiction films and projects that, over time, became just too similar. For an artist like him who wanted more ambitious projects, constantly having to destroy models and sets created an artistic fatigue in him. He had proven that his animation was the best, that his techniques were more visually pleasing and less expensive than industry standards, so he wanted to do something else. Harryhausen had previously created several sketches for a film project about Sinbad, a well-known story often explored in pop culture and across various mediums. These were the drawings Harryhausen presented to convince producer to give him the project. Personally, I found his drawings absolutely fabulous, and it's impressive to see how well Harryhausen adapted them for the big screen. His influence was based on the drawings of Gustave Doré, which you are seeing right now. Clearly, we can see a similar style. But even though the drawings were beautiful, and even though Harryhausen had shown his expertise in other films, animation didn't have the best reputation in Hollywood in the 50s. It was a technique that, in the wrong hands, could often exceed allocated budgets. And not only that, in 1955, Son of Sinbad, directed by Ted Tetzlaff, was released in theaters and was considered a flop. Many producers questioned the creation of fantasy films and questioned the exploitation of the Sinbad franchise. Harryhausen knew his film would cost more than any he had made before. His ideas were grandiose and ambitious. Charles Schneer, his friend and producer, advised him to rework some ideas to make the project more realistic. By removing some monsters and proposing a smaller budget, Columbia gave Harryhausen the green light for the project. However, and not surprisingly, Harryhausen was to be the creative centerpiece of the project, so much so that Harryhausen was insured for the entire project. If anything were to happen to him, the movie would not see the light of day. Harryhausen and his producer Charles Schneer had high expectations. Schneer would spend the entire shoot on location. He would also support his friend Harryhausen in the day-to-day running of the shoot. He was therefore far from being just a simple investor. Harryhausen, however, had legitimate concern before starting the project. Until then, he had only worked with special effects on black and white feature films. At that time, color animation was not as refined as black and white. Additionally, Columbia had high expectations for the films, especially the fluidity of the animation. Despite Harryhausen's misgivings, he knew that if the Seventh Voyage was to reach its full potential, it had to be in color. And he was right. Nobody wants to see a Sinbad movie in black and white. They want to see color, something grandiose and extravagant. One of the problems with color animation at the time was that the contrast of colors made the animation appear unreal. But with the help of Columbia, Harryhausen achieved an impressive balance and thus offered his first color film. During the filming of the movie, Harryhausen had to experiment with several innovative techniques that surprised several members of the crew. KERWIN Matthews, the film star, found the animator's method rather curious, but we'll get back to that later when we will talk about specific moments in the film. The Seventh Voyage was filmed in Spain, a non-traditional location for Hollywood movies, but one that had the advantage of being completely inexpensive. But filming the movie in a non-traditional location came with its own challenges, including the local crew's complete inexperience. A few awkward moments occurred during filming, including a rather famous one where the crew forgot their sailor swords. To address this, several wooden swords can be seen in the film, carved on location on the day of filming. Another interesting, unusual fact is the use of the ship in the film. Unlike today, where everything would be shot in front of a green screen, Columbia rented a copy of the Santa Maria, one of the ships used by Christopher Columbus. The important word here is copy, because this replica wasn't made to go to sea. When the film crew decided to take the boat out to sea anyway, they almost destroyed the boat and sank. Fortunately, nothing serious happened, but they were ordered not to move the boat again. When it came time to shoot the storm scene with the sirens, the boat had to remain motionless, a scene that would have benefited from being more dynamic. One of the few regrets I have with this film is that this storm scene, which is really well played by the actors, lacks something to live up to the epic height of the film. Filming, despite the challenges, went smoothly, and within 3 months, all the scenes with the actors were completed. The next step was animation, the biggest challenge of Harryhausen's career. He would need 11 months to complete the film's numerous effects. And the result, well, it was better than anyone could have expected. KERWIN Matthews remembers going to the film's premiere wondering if it was really the same film he was working on, because obviously Matthews had to work with special effects that didn't exist yet. And I always come back to thinking that it must have been pretty awkward during filming. Imagine shooting a film for weeks, swinging swords in the air, only to finally go to the theater and see yourself in an epic fight scene with a skeleton. Matthews was dazzled by the result. Clearly he wasn't the only one, because the seventh Voyage of Sinbad was one of the cinematic surprises of 1958. With a budget of $650,000, the films grossed $6 million worldwide and $3.5 million in the United States alone. The film was not only a success, but it completely redirected Harryhausen's career toward fantasy films, while completely reviving the genre. By pursuing his artistic path, Harryhausen changed the face of cinema. This was a significant achievement for many special effects artists, as well as many film fans in general, who had just realized that the industry had changed. Harryhausen had succeeded in his gamble and captured the essence of fantasy with his film. This next part of the video is very dear to my heart, because obviously The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is a film with incredible special effects, but we tend not to consider it to be, in general, a highly entertaining film. From the very beginning, I have to say I was captivated by the film's presentation. The film's introduction, in the form of a fresco, shows several moments that will occur in the movie. It's hard to believe the first time you see the movie that the animation will be even more epic than the drawing. But that's not all, because behind these beautiful drawings, there's also a soundtrack that from the very beginning demonstrates the energy and epic nature of the project. Bernard Herrmann has created a soundtrack that wonderfully complements the film. But before the music, we must note the work that was done to make certain sequences without special effects flamboyant and extravagant. Sinbad's brief passage in Baghdad, which completely sets the story, stands out for the liveliness and energy of the costumes and sets. It's a festival of color, dance, and music. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Baghdad scenes are the film's strong point, but we can feel that an attempt was made to create a diversion by working on the visual presentation. In terms of acting, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is, for almost the entire cast, a film with rigorous and classic direction. KERWIN Matthews, who plays Sinbad, has such a typical hero character without much personality other than courage that he is outclassed by practically everyone else. But I have to give it to him though, he's got riz. I think we will all agree on who steals the show in this film, and I'd say it's not any animated monster but one made of human flesh and blood. Doran Thatcher not only gives the best performance in the film, he commands all the attention in every scene as Sakura the evil wizard. He's simply larger than life and magnificent in this role. Larger than life was exactly what Harryhausen was looking for with the role of Sakura, who is truly the character who most drives the story forward. Some will say that he's borderline cartoony and that the film's storyline may be questionable. How can anyone in their right mind can doubt for a moment that he's not responsible for the princess shrinking? I mean, don't take us for idiots. Some might also argue that the Seventh Voyage presentation is almost theatrical and that there aren't enough cuts in the editing. I would defend the film's approach by saying that by limiting the cuts, the Seventh Voyage gave Harryhausen's creatures room to fully take shape. They look more real because they aren't masked by the editing. By limiting the cuts, we end up with a fantastic film that is almost larger than life and which gives full play to the special effects. It is this grandiose and epic aspect that remains etched in my memory when I think of the film. I think the film would have benefited from a little more attention to certain action moments, especially the action scenes that didn't involve special effects. Like like for example the fights on the boat, but in the 1950s these kind of scenes were an industry standard. One aspect that I think should be discussed more is practically everything about the princess in the film, because not only is Catherine Grant sublime in the role, there are many positive elements, intended or not, that contribute to my appreciation of the film. The work that was done on her transformation into a mouse-sized person deserves a lot of praise in my opinion. It never feels cheap or poorly presented. Just the way the transformation is executed, with just one arm changing size, is a believable way to cover up a scene that could have turned ridiculous. And not just the transformation, the sound design for the princess, who has a quieter voice due to her small size and the distance from the dialogue, shows an attention to detail that many of the industry wouldn't have paid. They would have simply zoomed in on the princess and kept the sound at the same level as Sinbad's.
Marissa.
Beside the fact that the princess is so positive at all times that it becomes comical, I found that she is linked to two scenes that still make me laugh today. First, there is this slide when she arrives in the genie's lamp. I mean, wow. Wow. Then this moment where she helps Sinbad opens the cage and he comes in like a madman and lifts the lid, as if they forgot that she could still be there and probably thrown 1 kilometer in the air. Other moments continue to entertain me, like the one where the Cyclops, having found his next meal, skewers a sailor on the fire and watches him licking his lips. You'd almost think he's about to add salt and pepper. Also, Sakura's wonderful moment of storytelling poetry with the dragon.
Follow! Kill! Kill!
Oh, if only it were that easy to solve your problems with a single action verb. One aspect that I feel isn't emphasized enough is the violence presented on screen. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is a mainstream film, but it features many characters who die horribly. Honestly, there's a higher body count than in the Friday the 13th movies. In film, of course, many planned things change when it comes to delivering a final product. The Seventh Voyage, with the budgetary restriction that led to its receiving the green light for financing, was no exception. For example, a moment where a two-headed bird was supposed to throw a stone at Sinbad and his sailors was simply replaced by the Cyclops, who was doing overtime, I guess, compared to his intended appearances. The skeleton was supposed to be the Grim Reaper originally. There was supposed also to be a giant toad in the cavern. A character named the Lord of Fear was supposed to appear, and a location named the Valley of Diamonds was also supposed to appear. However, some things were cut in the editing, and sadly, no trace of them seems to have been kept. Sinbad had to fight giant rats. Two Cyclops had to fight each other, competing to eat a sailor. An interesting element is the removal of the Bat Devils that were supposed to be included in the film, who were removed and who ultimately became the RPs in Jason of the Argonauts. And the saddest thing about the cut, in my opinion, is the fact that they didn't add sirens to the general panic scene on the boat. A scene I found very well shot, but which clearly lacked one more element to give it depth. In the end, aside from this last point, I consider the cuts to be justified and logical. The Seventh Voyage is such a good film because it's simple, rhythmic, and its narrative isn't overloaded with creatures appearing at random. And now comes the moment you've perhaps been waiting for the most when talking about this splendid film, the special effects. And I think we can't talk about special effects without mentioning the term coined by Harryhausen and Charles Schneer, dynamation. But what is dynamation? We can clearly say that they advertise it extensively without ever clearly explaining it at the time. The dynamation process is actually really simple. It's a technique that combines special effects with live action moments. The idea is to make them more realistic by connecting them to reality. The goal is for the special effects to be so impressive that they'll simply blend into the real world and create an immersion never before seen in cinema. It would be a lie to say that the technique was revolutionary from a purely theoretical perspective. King Kong, which I still have to mention in this video, took this technique to a whole new level at the time. However, Ray Harryhausen definitely took this process and brought it to a whole new level of excellence right up until his final film. Harryhausen said a phrase that I think completely represents his special effect process. Stop motion adds to the value of the real world. A scene that might have previously been shot with a homemade creature with limited mobility and a questionable look can now connect to the real world by looking natural supernatural and dangerous. While many films have worked wonders with beautiful special effects and convincing costumes, there's no denying that Harryhausen's approach allowed for the inclusion of 4 more imposing and epic creatures. From the 7th Voyage of Sinbad onward, the potential of genre cinema took a whole new direction. But this cinematic innovation between reality and stop motion came at a cost. The models Harryhausen used generally deteriorated after extensive manipulation. For the 7th Voyage, the manipulation time was much higher than usual as he pushed the fluidity of animation much further with more complex creatures. After much experimentation and with the means to acquire better quality materials, Harryhausen came up with a new technique for baking and preparing his miniatures. This was good news for him, but way less so for his marriage, as the smell of his new models stank out the entire house and refused to leave. And if we think further, it turned out to be more complex than just better models. Now Harryhausen's monsters were in color for the first time. A huge step because in his previous black and white films, model details were less important. Now they had to look believable and detailed in a world with more image elements for the viewer to consider. And then, well, the movie begins, and less than 5 minutes into the screening, the Cyclops make a grand entrance. The 7th Voyage promised a film full of adventures and creatures, and it's safe to say that they didn't lie about it, immediately delivering the goods with one of the most unforgettable monsters of Harryhausen's career. I mean, look at this, just the details of the Cyclops without even getting into the animation are absolutely incredible. Harryhausen was afraid that if the Cyclops had a completely human body, he would have looked like he was wearing a costume. Because obviously they would have had to put pants on him. The audience couldn't see the private parts of a monster like that. Think about children's, for God's sake. That's why he had hairy legs, which I think made him look even more feral. But the symbolism of the Cyclops' first presence in the film seems powerful to me. Because the impact goes beyond the image before the viewer's eye, we immediately realize that the creature is filmed at great length, that he is not just a brief presence in the film, we can fully admire him. Here I'm going to address the horror movie fans because they're the ones who will understand my point best. Is there anything more disappointing than watching a movie that promises a creature and in the end all we get as viewers is something not very pretty and edited with a few brief shots to hide the flaws in the costume design? Oh yes, the poster is magnificent and the synopsis behind the film promised you a lot of things, and in the end it's only disappointment. Ray Harryhausen had this talent of not hiding his special effects. They were the stars of his film. There is no economy to be made, no deception for the spectator, no creative shortcuts. It was Harryhausen's pride that his creatures steal the scene. But having to film such large monsters came with its own set of technical challenges. Because the action had to look natural and the actors had to look and position themselves in the right places. To achieve this, Harryhausen and Nathan Jaren shot the film with what's called a monster stick. This tool allowed the actors to know exactly where to look in relation to the creature's future positioning. The other challenge was that in close interaction, Harryhausen had to replace the human actors with miniatures. We see this, for example, during the scene where the Cyclops grabs one of the crew member. I wouldn't say it's a very convincing effect in 2025, but for the time, the effect could have seemed really impressive. Nevertheless, it was a very clever way to add dynamism to certain interaction scenes. These moments were important because the 7th Voyage is essentially an action film, and Harryhausen's special effects are mainly used for spectacular action scenes. In fact, it's one of the films that I find best paced in terms of its objectives, which is to quickly string together exposition scenes and then leave plenty of room for the action. People aren't drawn to the cinema to see Sinbad speak, but to see him fight fantastic beasts. And this is where the 7th Voyage stands out best, not just for its special effects, but because the film feels like a grand spectacle. Even in the Baghdad section of the film, Harryhausen can't help but add a creature to remind us which film we're in. I found the Snake Woman interesting in that it reveals a little of the viewer's state in the face of the film's grandeur. A surprised silence from these viewers, surprised and overwhelmed by the quality of the project, is also the treatment Harryhausen received from his audience upon its release. No one had ever seen anything like it. The element about the monsters that stands out a lot in the fans' comment is the impressive fluidity of the enormous monsters depicted. Yes, the Cyclops is the star of the film, but I think back to this baby bird that mixes the clumsy side of a newborn and the violence of its hunger. I think of the Snake Woman as fascinating as she is horrifying, and this dragon, which must have been at the time certainly the most impressive and realistic dragon ever seen in cinema. Did you know that to recreate replicate the effect of fire coming out of the dragon's mouth, Harryhausen used a flamethrower positioned just like the dragon would be in the film. It seems like the very idea of Harryhausen holding a flamethrower is a symbol of coolness I can barely accept. In the end though, the fire effect is absolutely brilliant. And at this point in the video, I imagine some people have been thinking for a while, why didn't he talk about the fight with the skeleton? That's the best part. Well, that was my pièce de résistance for the special effects part. Because honestly, I still have a hard time imagining the difficulty and time taken to shoot such a quality scene. What was Harryhausen's goal? To stage with complete fluidity a fight between a real actor and, here, not a 10-foot monster, but an animated character the same size as the lead actor. A titanic challenge that could easily have looked ridiculous. Harryhausen's strategy was simple, but required surgical precision. Filming KERWIN Matthews fighting the skeleton without the skeleton, and then add the skeleton to match Matthews' movements in the scene. Harryhausen, you could say, invented cinematic shadowboxing, and he did it beautifully. KERWIN Matthews, though skeptical of the final result, obviously did everything he could to make this scene a success, perhaps the greatest scene of his career. To achieve this, he was trained by a fencing master, and his sword movements are clearly full of confidence and vivacity. Perhaps he should have had a trainer for unarmed combat, just saying, because these scenes are rough. If there has obviously been in the history of cinema the insertion of creature mixed with real actors, it is the first scene in the history of filmmaking featuring the first one-on-one action scene of this kind between a creature and a human being. It is also, in my opinion, one of the best, and when we look at where cinema is, we say to ourselves that this scene beats several made today. Honestly, I had more fun seeing this than Red Hulk vs. Captain America. I know it was a low blow, but you'll have to convince me that I'm wrong. The fight between Sinbad and the skeleton doesn't just look like a fight, it's almost a dance, and that naturalness is possibly the hardest thing to achieve with special effects. Harryhausen succeeded on his first attempt, and he would go even further later. This fight captured the imagination of a generation of future creators. Henry Selick, George Lucas, and others had vivid memories of seeing Sinbad fight a skeleton in the best action scene they had ever seen. Harryhausen took the physics of movement to another level, and even when he had his creature fight each other, the results were incredible. And I know that I'm kind of beating a dead horse on this point, but the fight between the Cyclops and the dragon is definitely better than any human fight in the film. The violence of the scene and the feeling that each other wants to target the other weak points to kill them, this kind of scene puts us in an humble position as a spectator. These two monsters could eliminate us in a matter of seconds. My obvious position regarding the film's special effects is that Harryhausen didn't just raise his game, he raised the game of an entire industry. And his film was really influential. Until then, there had been a clear stagnation in mid-budget films when it came to special effects. Now people were going to expect more, and thankfully, that's what happened. I think without a shadow of a doubt, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad falls into that category of films that may seem like simple retro entertainment, but remain to this day one of the most influential films in American cinema and genre entertainment. It's a film that remains impressively high quality while remaining almost refreshingly simple today. And I hope this little video has shed some light on why The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad remains, even today, a film of enormous importance. Thank you for being there, and I don't know what my next project will be, but I hope you may have learned something or just had a good time with me. Jobichiro, signing out.